Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Aruna, that was exhilarating. And if I want to be even half as effective, I better not talk about the GMOs in terms of its technology, or you will all leave the hall. What I'm going to try and do is something a little different. I'm going to say why we cannot have GMOs if we are going to do a satyagraha for life through agroecology. I'll give you a very brief background of what has happened so far in India. We have just one GMO crop, it's called BT cotton. And we now have definitive data after 14 years that BT cotton has failed. Even the central government has had to admit it in the High Court in Delhi. And the reason why it's failed is because the big promise that BT started with in 2002, when Monsanto and the government of India introduced it, they said to our farmers, we have a magic bean for you. It'll give you high yield and you won't need to spray for pests. Now, if I were a farmer, I think that would be irresistible. So what did our farmers do over the next 10 years is our production on total farmlands increased exponentially. We became the largest BT cotton and cotton production country in the world. The government took that to mean that BT cotton had been outstanding as a success model for BT crops. They took production and they forgot, deliberately or otherwise, to look at yield. And the yields came right down. And the reason was a scientific fact, or the fact of nature, that a bug will form resistance, like antibiotics. In the West, you've got another crop, it's another technology called herbicide-tolerant crops. 99% of all crops in the world are either BT or they're HT. 99%. All the experimentation with drought, traits, these are complex genetic crops, have failed in GMOs. It's your traditional breeding techniques that have all the advantages over here, and GMOs don't come anywhere near. So now with that introduction, I would like to go into why, if we want to succeed with our farming, with our farmers, safe food, ecology, we cannot have GMOs for one reason, that there will be contamination, they're not coexistent. You either have agroecology or you have GMOs, you cannot have both. So that is the conundrum that I will be addressing. Very recently, there were two studies that came out, and I mean recent, like in the last 3 months. It's called the ecosystem collapse. It's an existential crisis worldwide, where insects are disappearing. The first study was a comprehensive review of 73 historical reports in January 2019, just this year. And they found that over 40% of our insect species are threatened with extinction. And the rate of decline is at 2.5% a year of total mass of insects, suggesting that within 100 years, we may have no insects. Now, I don't think it takes a PhD in any subject to understand what will happen to us if we have no insects, and I will flag the bee and all the pollinators. As Einstein said a long time ago, if your bees disappear, mankind will disappear. Now, the drivers in order of importance is industrial agriculture, number one. Synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. Other biological factors, including climate change, is fourth and fifth. So now, if you factor in climate change, and I think we will need the IPCC to do that. Maybe we will collapse in the next 20 years, because we've been told we've got 12 years in order to stop the 0.5 degree centigrade rise. Otherwise, we are in a reverse cycle, we can do nothing. So this was the compelling evidence of agricultural intensification via chemicals. GMOs drive industrial agriculture, they drive chemicals, they drive monocultures, and they push down seed diversity. So I'm interjecting the GMO issue into all of this is to tell you why we can't have it this way. The second study was by a pretty famous scientist called Aruna. He now concentrates on ecology and agriculture. He was an EPA scientist. So he is a geneticist and a plant pathologist. He comes from a very rich background of science. Basically, corporate agribusiness claims that large-scale industrial farming is required to feed the world. Not true. As Vandana has cleared this comprehensively, and many, many studies by the FAO on small farms have said, and including does, that small farms, agroecology, outproduce GMOs hands down, as well as industrial farming systems. Again, the pointer is to agroecology. But as I said, if we're going to do this, we have to remove GMOs out of the equation. We have the Indian experience now with BT cotton. They have every other crop you can imagine in the system waiting to come on. This year, in October, they will hit us, or try to, with mustard, GM mustard. And that too will be in hybrids. I won't go into a long discussion of why not hybrids. Vandana hit it very clearly on. But you should know that 2/3 of our farming is rain-fed. And hybrids do not suit rain-fed farming at all. It has to be irrigated. So now they introduced cotton, if you can imagine this, into hybrids, our best hybrids, for two reasons. One is that they fudge the yield in the short term and say BT cotton has succeeded. And that was a big reason. The second reason is what we call value capture. They gave Monsanto the profit for their first Vanguard 1 BT cotton, even though there was no patent on it. And the seed prices in the first year, when it was introduced, went up by 2,000%. Actually did. Today we've driven it down, government interjection. It's hard, but there's no comparison between what we had before and what the BT seed now costs, and it has collapsed. So GMOs, 95% of our farming today in BT is Monsanto and a few other companies, BT cotton. So it's a gateway to control our germplasm. It's happened in cotton, it's happened in the West in corn, it's happened in soya, and this is the process. They want to do mustard also in hybrids. So now we have monoculture, and we know what monoculture does in terms of the farm. And there can be no coexistence because of contamination. Now that is the outstanding issue as far as GMOs are concerned. Once a GMO is released into the environment, nature takes over. You've got your pollinators going with pollen. In a country like India, we are one of 17 hotspots of diversity. We would be thoroughly contaminated. Mustard has 9,720 accessions in our gene banks. Brinjal, which they tried to do 10 years ago, we are the largest biodiverse, genetically biodiverse country in the world for brinjal. We have 2,500 varieties, including one. It will all be contaminated. So this is why GMOs and agroecology are not compatible. All right. There are very major problems in terms of health with GMOs, and they have been growing, not diminishing. So in the early years, we had a bit of a problem trying to prove that there were health problems, but today we no longer have that problem. The Bt gene is definitely toxic to a human gut system. And HT crops, there are 14,000 cases in the US courts dealing with glyphosate in Kansas. So, with contamination, what's going to happen is that your seeds get contaminated at the molecular level. So any toxicity you then have will be forevermore because it's irreversible. So that will form your seed system in India if we get taken over by GMOs. I want to now switch to something which I think might explain these issues rather nicely, and they will, I think, be quite interesting. There are two lessons from history. One is of an old, weedy Iraqi wheat sample. In 1948, there was a famous agro-scientist called Jack Howland. And the wheat crop in America was hit by rust, and they were going to lose it. Now, at some point earlier, someone had come through from Iraq, from the Fertile Crescent wheat, with a sample. It was lodged in as PL 178383 and put in the tank. So when this rust epidemic took place, Jack sent out for whatever they could find. And the scientists came up with this particular wheat genetic seed. And they found that it was resistant to 4 types of rust, 35 races of common blunt, 10 races of some other kind of rust, good tolerance to flag, smut, and snow mold. So he gave instructions, use it, and it saved the wheat crop in America. The second lesson happened in 1963, I think it was. We call it late warnings, long latent period hazards of technology. He said, I'll tell you who he was. If you have a memory for what Vandana said a little while ago, she mentioned it. He talked to all these Luddites, clever people who can come up with explanations as to why technology is failing. And you know, they're very clever and they're very wrong. They use scare tactics, all of us here. Ethics, emotion, oratory. I'm going to accuse you of that, Vandana.
I've been accused many times
of oratory.
Well-paid PR people doing the attacks.
And he said the safety record of this particular technology is remarkable. Millions of people, prolonged exposure, nothing has happened. He was right. It's Norman Borlaug speaking in 1971, before GMOs was even thought of. But the technology that he was speaking about was DDT. Now, there were no human cancers linked to DDT at all. Birds were done, but nothing to do with human health problems. It would take 36 years to find out what this impact was. The US banned DDT in 1972. The WHO said that the safety record of DDT is phenomenally good. I'm talking 1970. 30 separate studies, the Long Island study, which was a meta-analysis, nothing was found, no link. They were looking in all the wrong places. There was a scientist called Barbara Cohen, Berkeley University. She was a scientist who dealt with radiation. And she took a cue that in radiation studies there's a link with breast cancer and age. So she looked around for data sets. How can we do it? Because DDT had been banned for decades. Where is the data? She found it. She tracked it down. 40 years later, she tracked down a remarkable set of data. Women born before 1931, all past puberty, were more likely to develop any kind of cancer. However, women who had the highest exposure to DDT before the age of 14, now all the statistics started to scramble in terms of cancers. All the other studies that they did, the Long Island study, everything missed this critical period before puberty and after puberty. Another 54-year-old study, follow-up study was done, and that was only the beginning. Now, DDT, first 34 years, then 54 years. With GMOs, you release it today in a commercial crop, you're probably done for. You don't have 34 years, you don't even have 2 years. You've got contamination going in, and it is at the molecular level of your seed. Now, DDT probably is a bad example in the sense that it lodges in the environment almost decades, 7 decades, 8 decades. But it doesn't cause contamination of your genetic seed stock. That's what happens with GMOs. We don't have the time. That's the difference in the criticality between hazardous technologies. Now you take drugs. There was a very, very bad situation in the 1970s or the 1960s with thalidomide. Deformed babies, fetuses, all of this. But when they found this out and they withdrew thalidomide, the problem started. So this is the contrast that I want to draw in this matter. This is the contrast between hazardous technologies like drugs and GMOs. The other problem is DDT, when it first came out, the person who invented it received a Nobel Prize for chemistry. DDT was thought to be good. It's still thought to be good by whole groups of people. Not so GMOs. GMOs was always fraudulent from the start. The Americans, starting with, I think it's the Reagan administration, gave a White House directive to promote the GMO industry, and the top people in the FDA resigned because they said this is a harmful technology. Now, the myths have gone on for the last 40 years. Those myths are BT is only dangerous for an alkaline gut system, which is a worm. It's not dangerous for us. We've got acidic gut systems. Today we find that is not true. In fact, a farmer in Haryana once said to me about 5 years ago, he said, "Madam, they're trying to tell us ye keera mar jata hai to hum nahi marenge." We don't believe this. This is actually what he said. DDT is one chemical. GMOs are all different. It's an endocrine disruptor, so is a GMO. So these are the issues. We won't have the luxury of undoing any harm that GMOs may cause. It is irreversible. You cannot roll the clock back. So, if GMOs are failed, and I think the figures are something like this. It takes $100 million to research a GMO. It takes $1 million to bring in a seed through breeding. That's the difference.
0 if it's the farm.
Yes, 0 if it's the farm. Okay? So we need a system systems redirection and investment and support by the government. And this is, I'll stop there. This is the reason why we have a problem today which is acute. We have mustard on the anvil, we've got corn on the anvil, we've got soya, we've got illegal plantings of GMOs by farmers who are telling the government we should be allowed to do what we want. We have a chief minister's meeting in about, I think, a month. 13 or 15 chief ministers of BJP states who are going to say to the government, you need to give us the right to grow GM crops in our states. And we really have something very, very urgent to confront, and we have to do it now. There are all sorts of things that we are trying to do other than the Supreme Court. There's another problem there. I won't say much, otherwise they put me in jail. But we have a serious problem in the Supreme Court. So I think we're going to have to put together a core group and a strategy as to what we're going to do. Because the first thing is to keep the GMO out. We must push agroecology, but if this comes in, we've lost the fight before we even start. And that's my message. Thank you.